Segment 3, Gold and Black Live. Best part of my job is that we have a really great network of people I've had a chance to work with when they were students at Purdue. This is one of these guys, Tyler Oaks, and he's gone on to do far bigger and better things, which I knew he would, but not because of his intern program, but because he's a smart guy. And he is our writer on Fridays on our site with Covering the Tracks, which is, I know Tyler probably saw this coming. I'm not sure I did 10 years ago, where sports gambling was going to be so big in college sports and legal. And that is now where we are. And if you want to know what the heck to think about if you're placing a bet on Purdue, but not even, I think it goes far beyond that. I think it goes to understanding what you're doing when you're betting. Make sure you check out our site this afternoon, because it's probably already posted, Covering the Tracks, looking at the Purdue-Wisconsin game. Tyler, welcome to the show, and we are grateful for all you do for us, because it's a really, I know our readers really enjoy that column every week.
Yeah, thank you for having me, and love writing it. It's a passion project, and helps me get prepared for the games, and so I love doing it.
You look at that, and maybe as a youngster growing up in Indianapolis area, was this something that I mean, I've been mesmerized by the line, I suppose, even back 40, 50 years ago when you'd see it in the newspaper. How did you get involved with this and interest in just understanding how Vegas and others handicap sporting events?
Yeah, so I think really when I was a kid, I think I was just such an avid sports fan that it started with something as simple as being at recess with friends, and you're in sixth grade and saying, "Well, I think the Colts are gonna to beat the heck out of whoever," and it kind of started there, and it really grew, and it wasn't probably until college where I really started to follow things. And I think part of that was, when I started at Purdue was, 2012, the fall. And I had to endure some not very fun football, especially if you look at it purely from a win-loss standpoint.
Yeah.
And so I think then the spread really started to play a factor for me, because it gave me something else to root for in some of these blowout games. Or you could say, well, at least Purdue's outdoing a projection, so to speak. And it gave me a good barometer. And then it just kind of not exploded, but really trickled from there. I found, a friend group at Purdue who kind of had the same interests. We were all kind of into it, and, we loved college football. For us, it made the games more fun to watch. And then once I got into, post law school into grad school, I started to kind of see the winds of change, so to speak, where the Supreme Court was going to review PASPA and overturning that and pushing it to the states. And that's really where it kind of took off, because I saw legalization coming. And then from there, as a kid, my dad was a subscriber to you all. And so I would read as much as I could about the games. But this for me was just another angle to kind of review games, preview games, and really get excited for the upcoming weekend.
Yeah, it is brings a whole angle. And when you're going through Purdue football from, like I said, your college days were kind of dry in terms of wins and losses. My son was about the same time. That's good that it's back to that. All right, let's talk Purdue, Wisconsin, the nuts and bolts of this one. The Boilermakers go in as at least the last I checked, a couple point underdog. Tell me about what you're writing Covering the Tracks for the site, but how you look at this game from that standpoint, where the money is, and Wisconsin's got a lot of injuries. Purdue seems to have some momentum, but how do you take when you take an evaluation of this game? Where do you see it?
Yeah, so to kind of start off, for anybody who hasn't read the column, I am a self-prescribed contrarian, which is a style of gambling where when I look at things, I try to what's called fade the public, based on the notion that Vegas always wins. I want to be on their side. And so when you say things like Wisconsin's got injuries and Purdue's coming in with momentum. As a contrarian, I hear those words and think Wisconsin's probably leaning towards the right side because the public is probably seeing those things and thinking Purdue is the right bet. So initially, when I saw this line drop, it opened at 2.5 and it's held at 2.5 as Wisconsin a 2.5-point favorite. I hated it because the fact that Wisconsin is favored in this game tells me a lot. And it's concerning because of exactly what you said. Purdue's coming in off a 3-game win streak. 2 of those are or more than that, excuse me. But in the Big Ten, at least, 2 of those are incredibly impressive wins, at Maryland and at Minnesota. And if you're sitting there and you see a Wisconsin team 3-4 who just lost to a bad Michigan State team, you're telling yourself, Purdue's going to blow them out of the water. This should be an easy win. But then you see Vegas drop a line of Wisconsin favored, and it almost shocks you to your core.
Yeah.
And when that happens, traditionally speaking, it means it's the right side. And so for me, and this will be in the article, that alone pushed me to Wisconsin. Then from there, I'm going to go and I am going to look at where the money's falling because of that contrarian style. I want to be opposite of where all the money is if it's concentrated on one side or the other. Right now, it's 70% of bets and money are on Purdue. There's a very large public backing on the Boilers, which for me is another red flag where that is going to be concerning for me. And so those 2 things alone right off the bat, as a Purdue fan, are not fun to read and realize. And then from there, I try to tie those. Normally the numbers are the most important thing for me. You'll see some gamblers out there with different style. The Bear on ESPN, for example, is massive with trends. He loves trends. Trends dictate a majority of his gambling, and trends can be super helpful. I use trends. Not as heavily as he does, but then you look at trends with this game, and it's no secret the success that Wisconsin has had over Purdue, especially at Camp Randall. You look going back that Purdue won there in 2003. I came to the realization when I was writing the article that you have freshmen on Purdue's roster who have not been alive when Purdue's beaten Wisconsin in football. So this game, I think, presents a lot of Purdue fans going in thinking, oh, we're going to kill Wisconsin because we look good and they've looked awful. And I just think I would very much caution that and wouldn't be surprised if Wisconsin squeaks out a win on Saturday.
Yeah, it is a game that, like I said, we all tend to favor momentum and things like that, which don't necessarily matter when they line it up. I mean, it does matter a little bit, but Wisconsin, it's just a hard one to figure out. They go and kill Northwestern under Jim Leonhard. And then last week I thought was really, really puzzling to me in terms of what happened at Michigan State. But again, that's the week-to-week nature also of college football. I mean, do you subscribe to that there's, it's just hard to know what the heck's going to happen when you I'm talking about teams like the Michigan States of the world or the Iowas, or even what Rutgers and Indiana will do. Those are interesting plays because it's a little bit hard to predict.
And even, last week, you look at Nebraska coming in. I don't think anybody expected Nebraska to the Purdue defense had played really, really well. And to give up as many points as they did, I think shocked people. Nebraska has not been a very good football team in a very long time. And their offense looked potent as can be, especially with the vertical threat. So it really can change week to week. I know with Wisconsin too, what's been really fascinating is to analyze, obviously Paul Chryst was their guy. And since Leonard's come in, he's a defensive guy. He's not going to call offensive plays, but to look at their offensive numbers, it's been relatively similar in their 2 games where you've seen a very balanced attack. Graham Mertz has thrown the ball probably 25 times with maybe a 5 deviation either way. You would expect Braylon Allen, to run the ball about 25 times. So they are keeping things extremely balanced. But the difference in the 2 games is success in the red zone and scoring. And you saw them put up, I think, 28 against Michigan State in overtime. but 42 against Northwestern. So, this certainly seems like a typical, maybe not a typical Wisconsin offense in the sense that they're not running as much as they used to. It's more balanced.
Yeah, you look at that, a lot of factors going into it, and that will be an interesting play for next year. In the world of gambling and is college football and the NFL, is football, I don't know, maybe the wrong word isn't easier, but is it a game that is easier, maybe a little more predictable than if you're betting on the NBA or college basketball? I mean, how do you view that in terms of where you spend your gambling time?
It's going to be personal preference.
Yeah.
It differs. There are some really old school gamblers that have been doing this for a long time that'll tell you, the easiest sport is baseball because you have 162 games. In theory, if you take a team like the Dodgers, you would expect the Dodgers to win 100 games. And so, you have this large sample size. A lot of people will tell you the NFL is the hardest, just because there is a lot of parity in the NFL. And you can see, kind of like college football, you can see crazy things happen on any given Sunday where, I remember last year when the Bills lost to the Jacksonville Jaguars, and, there's things. Personally, I think college basketball is the hardest sport to gamble on, and it's not really close for me. There are so many factors that go into a spread where it's, does a coach foul at the end? How much does he foul at the end of the games? You're banking on kids hitting free throws at end of games, and you can have these massive swings where it just changes game to game, especially with multiple games per week. So personally, I've found the most success with college football and the NFL. That could just be because I like football. Football is my favorite sport. I played it growing up. I'm familiar with it. So I allocate most of my, at least, research and time into the football world. But college basketball is a blast to bet on.
Yeah.
And especially, it'll break your heart, but especially, you look at when March comes around and you've got games all day. It's a blast.
Yeah, you have that in the beauty of online gambling where you can do it right sitting in your seat. It's a brave new world, and the lines change during the middle of the games. It's crazy. I mean, from that standpoint, in terms of what can play out and what opportunities people have, it does, especially people of your generation. It's just a way of really enjoying and taking in sports.
Yeah, and I think it's important. I mean, just like any vice, if you want to call it that, it's important, especially at a young age, or when you start, to understand bankroll management, to understand self-discipline, to understand who you are, because it can get out of, I'm not going to lie and say, it's all sunshine and rainbows. It can get out of hand. And so it's extremely important to have safeguards in place, so you're never betting more than you can afford to lose, because you're right, they make it so easy nowadays where you could lay in bed and bet on anything from college basketball to Chinese ping pong at 3 a.m. to Korean baseball. There is an endless amount of things that you're able to place bets on at any minute of the day. And so making sure you're doing it smart and staying disciplined is more important than it ever is or ever has been.
Yeah, no question. Good advice, and an important thing to remember, because you are in fact throwing money out there, and you better be careful with it. So, all right. Well, we'll look forward to, like I said, make sure you check out our site every Friday covering the tracks. Tyler Oaks does a great job with that, and really you do a great job also with the glossary of terms and making sure that people, understand what terminology is out there, because that is also part of the gambling story. And as you prepare for things, what there is to see and understand, there's a nuance to it, and then some as this goes. All right, Tyler, thanks so much for your time. We'll look forward to the column, and we'll see how things all play out. You're right. I'm one of those guys that thinks, and probably that's why I certainly love the line. I don't gamble, but I do. I'm one of those ones that go, Purdue's got the momentum here. It's, this is a game that they're going to win finally. As they say, Lee Corso says, not so fast.
Ugh.
We'll have to wait out and see what happens. And if Purdue fans will be on pins and needles probably till about the 7 o'clock hour on Eastern time on Saturday night. So Tyler, thanks again. I want to thank our sponsors, also Triple X on the hill, but on the level of Purdue tradition since 1929. I bet you Tyler's been there a time or two in his college days. State Farm agent Trent Johnson at trentismyagent.com. Thank also Tom Dienhart and Tom Moreland for joining us today, and Gordon Jackson, Mary Truax, and the group at WLFI for making this all happen. We will not have a show next week because Purdue has a bye week. The Boilermakers will be back in action on November 5th. We'll have a show on the 4th as Purdue takes on Iowa in what will be sold out Ross-Ade Stadium. So that'll be fun as well as we make our way into November. Tyler, thanks again. Have a great week, everybody. And we'll look forward to seeing you in a couple weeks on Gold and Black Live.